in this house, it all comes together in this house of God.
In this house beats the heart of a family. In this house is the center of a community. We study and we pray, find meaning in each day. In this house, in this house, in this house. In this house is a spark of God's creation. In this house there is joy and celebration. By song or by word, your prayers will be heard. In this house, in this house, in this house. In this house, in this house, it all comes together in this house. In this house, in this house, it all comes together in this house of God. In this house we can shelter, we can clothe and feed. In this house there is always help for those in need. The stranger makes a friend, becomes inspired again. In this house, in this house, in this house, you go. In this house, in this house.
Originally, the congregation, B'nai Lois, you came across that Lois Levine was the real, she was the leader in the early years, and the joke was to call it B'nai Lois. 1970 I was ordained, and they offered me a full-time position. So we moved within 2 years from being from force twice a month services to a full-blown congregation with a full-time rabbi inside of 2 years. And it was because of the magical relationship that we all had with each other. We really enjoyed each other a lot. The truth of the matter is I've had an absolutely incredible career, but I never did anything better than I did in New Haven, and I never did anything more creative than I did in New Haven, and I certainly never had people of the quality. I mean, in London I had people who were Supreme Court justices and cabinet ministers, but in terms of the quality of the people, in terms of our enjoying each other and our being able to have interesting discussions, and I never had a group that lived up to them. So, you know, so it's really a great place, and it's nice to see when I go back the extent to which it hasn't changed. And so we did a lot of very creative things in Jewish education and in worship. We were always pushing the envelope institutionally, and yet we had a tiny congregation, and we were doing it on a shoestring.
That this is the little temple that could. And this little temple that could did.
What I love about this temple is no matter who you are, when you walk in, you're welcome.
The party to celebrate Jerry Rieger's 25th, and the feeling in the room that night convinced me that I wanted to be an engaged member of Temple Emanuel.
It's part of our family, it's part of our tradition, it means everything to us.
Our immediate family members are all living at a distance. So this Temple Emanuel has become our surrogate family, very much so.
I love the feeling of the friendship and the camaraderie and the caring.
I just love the sense of community, the idea of belonging.
I think the whole experience is what is really important. Being able to participate at many levels.
What I like about it and why we stayed was the music, mostly, and Jerry.
is a part of our life in many, many ways. And it continues because Jeremy, our youngest son, and his family joined the synagogue 2 years ago.
And it's the spirit that this group of people brings to the sanctuary on Friday nights, or to parties, or to doing mitzvah projects, or anything else. There's always been a really strong core group. It sort of changes a little over the years.
I would say for me, the spiritual connection is the music. And that's from Jerry to Suri to Michael.
I have to say that we had visited a number of different temples, and this is the first temple that we felt most comfortable in, and where I felt accepted.
It's the people, it's the joy that the new rabbi, well, he's not so new anymore, it's a level of comfort. We leave home and we say, oh, do we have to go? And we come here and we're home again.
The thing about TE that we really love is that it's just more than a congregation. It's a community. It's a community of celebration. It's a community of reflection. It's a community of contemplation. People know each other. People care about each other. And people really love each other here.
And it was really easy to get involved very quickly. Our very first event that we went to was a beautiful sukkah at a member's home, and everyone was just coming up to us and welcoming us, and
Felt like family.
it was just like and that was what it was like from the very beginning. And 32 years later,
Here
you know,
we are.
we're still here.
I fell in love with Temple Emanuel because I loved and appreciated how the rabbi was part of the community. There wasn't the same elevation of the bima, of the podium, so the rabbi and the community functioned as one entity.
While all the synagogues were beautiful in the area, this was the most accepting and the most tolerant, it felt, at its core. And now we feel like we're part of the growth of a real reformation in the community.
From the beginning, we found it a welcoming place for our children, and a place that was both intellectually and spiritually stimulating. And we loved the warmth of the rabbis and of the whole congregation.
What actually brought me here was the philosophy of the synagogue, and the rabbis who have been involved has been to allow you to express your own feelings and beliefs in the way that you wish, which is what I love most about this place.
I love everything about Temple Emanuel. It's a fun place, it's a spiritual place, it's a place where we may have different views, different backgrounds, but we all come together and we all work together.
It was 1977, and my children were ready to start Hebrew school, and so we joined Temple Emanuel. And it ended up being so much more than just a place for the kids to get their training.
It's good to know that I can make people happy by mixing music with the traditions, and together you have a service that's musical but also meaning.
I love everything about Temple Emanuel, but if I had to pick out the two things that, you know, really draw me to the temple is A, the congregation. I've never met a warmer, more caring, generous, genuine group of people in my entire life.
That our mother Muriel was the face of Temple Emanuel for so many years, and 33 years, and I can still feel her in the buildings. And the one thing that I will never forget is her greeting on the telephone. She would say, I'll try to do it. She would say, "Shalom, Temple Emanuel," something very close to that. And every time I hear someone else try to say it, it just isn't the same. She was our matriarch, and she loved the temple. And her and my dad picked an excellent place to raise us, and now we're raising our children here. and that's what Temple family is all about.
Warmest memories are of the bar mitzvah of my son and the bar and bat mitzvah of my grandchildren. So we've had 4 generations. My mother joined. We had 4 generations at Temple Emanuel.
We both feel that resettling a family from Russia, the Eddingoffs, was one of the most memorable things that we have done. And we did it from before they arrived, and we cleaned and furnished a home for them, and we are still in contact with them, and they're still dear friends and part of our family. So that was something very important to us.
When my son was hysterical because he thought Rabbi Weiner was God, and how did he know his name?
I'll give you a special memory. My bar mitzvah haftorah was Micah 6, what doth the Lord require of thee? And I've always felt that that was kind of meant for me to model my life after. And the day I walked in here and saw it on the walls, because Gary Rappaport had made these things on the walls, it was just, my God, it is really home.
It has been told thee of humanity, what is good and what the Lord doth require of thee, only to do justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with thy God. Micah chapter 6, verse 8.
I particularly enjoy the fact that what typifies our congregation is that when we have the Onyx, after services on Friday or other events, people never leave. People enjoy staying here. Services are over, and then we're here for another hour, hour and a half later, and we're finally turning the lights off because we have to lock the doors and go home. But people just enjoy being here, and they enjoy each other's company.
The retreats, the adult retreats, or adult study weekends, or whatever we used to call them. I don't know, when the kids always wanted to know, where are you going and why aren't we going? And we'd say, oh, it's Mommy and Daddy camp. And it's only for one weekend, and we're going up to Great Barrington to Camp Eisner. And,
special memory. I mean, meeting Jerry, and I remember when Jerry came to our house when our first child was born, Josh, and ended up being there for the bris and with the family, and he was just always so welcome and warm, and embraced my family, embraced all of us. And I think it's just the family feeling here is what we always love.
All the Purams that we've celebrated together, and our ridiculous costumes that we wore, the retreats at Camp Eisner, the friends that we've made, the holidays that we've shared with so many people.
And on one particular incident, he had told the story about Noah's Ark, and he asked all the children to make sure that they were a specific animal. And my youngest daughter, Stacy, decided she was going to be a dog. And the kids were barking and braying and running around. And then when the time was over, Jerry was like, thank you very much. And Stacy continued to bark. And Jerry was very patient because the barking went on for at least another 5 minutes after that. So he was really terrific.
Mike Chosek and I rewrote the original Constitution, for the synagogue because it didn't exist really. It was in scraps, so we collected it together. I'm sure it's changed a lot since then, but that was one of the things we did.
During Glasnost, when the Russians were coming over, I guess it was this end of the 70s, 80s, I don't remember exactly when it became easy. They came over and everybody here was speaking Russian, and it was Purim, and Jerry was dressed up as a court jester, and one of the kids mischievously pulled the fire alarm. Police came out, and cops are looking around for somebody who could speak English, and they're going crazy, and finally Muriel and I walk out into the lobby, and he says to me, who's in charge? And I turn around and I said, believe it or not, the guy in the court jester's outfit. And the cops going, oh.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam.
Another aspect of Temple Emanuel that is just so important to me is the concept of tikkun olam, the concept that we need to work for those less fortunate, we need to repair the world. For 13 years, I was involved in the Social Action Committee, whether it was the soup kitchen or food drives or so many of the other projects. And I'm just so gratified that this project of the temple has just blossomed and continued and grown, and it is just so incredibly important.
Ki ata hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim.
I've been the president of the synagogue twice, for a couple of years in the mid-90s and then again in the late 2000s. And one of the most important things I think the synagogue has done was when Rabbi Brieger came to me early in my first term in the mid-90s and gave me an invitation he had just received from Habitat for Humanity's New Haven chapter. But then the local chapter said we really would like synagogues to be involved with churches in this covenantal community, building a house together. So we and Congregation Mishkan Israel were the first synagogues in the area to become involved with Habitat for Humanity. And now it's become a huge thing around the country for Reform synagogues and some conservative synagogues as well to partner with local habitats. But we were among the first probably handful or two handfuls of congregations in the whole country that did it. And that's something I think we can be amazingly proud of.
Well, Kathy and I actually met through a clothing drive at Temple Emanuel. I was new to Connecticut and volunteered to help Kathy pack clothes. And so our friendship began 12 years ago through social action at Temple Emanuel. And we both stay active in that today, and it's something that we share in terms of valuing our Judaism through social action.
Temple Emanuel became the place where I and my family experienced our own personal Judaism, most actively through self-action, through action, where we do Desk, the downtown evening soup kitchen. I've been in charge of staffing that from Temple Emanuel for 4 years now. And it just enables us to make our Judaism real.
I knew that religious school probably would benefit if I can step in and help with teaching or some curriculum development, but I didn't want to jump into it. I wanted really to learn about the place, to get to know people, and want people to get to know me. And this year, I'm very happy that I got involved in the school, and it feels like a very happy place. Indeed, we might be not the largest, we might be not the best equipped school around, but it feels like a very positive place. And one thing I know for sure, that those who come to the school wouldn't spend their Sunday mornings anywhere else, but rather be with their friends and with their teachers, and that's what counts.
One day, my little one was in the both of them were in Hebrew school, and the little one was in the Sunday class. Once a month they came to Sunday class and they began learning about ritual and some of the things about Judaica. And she came home one day, and she couldn't have been more than 3 years old, maybe she was coming up 4. And she said, "Daddy," she said, "I love Torah." And for me that was just something that was music to my ears. It was so incredible. And I didn't think I'd have such a profound effect in the place that I chose for my children. But I found out later that week what she really said was, "I love Laura," who was the madrahim for the class, which is just as fine, as long as she has that spiritual connection here too at that age.
a picture of a tree as its own logo because we are like a family. We are together, we're all different. And we are community. We are a community. And we are growing and we're all different. We have our own roots and we're celebrating 50 years of being here this year. We all grow from the same trunk, but we develop and we bring the hope. And you are the leaves, the newest leaves on this tree, guys.
Oh, say shalom.
There are many different religions, of course, but I must say ours has the best tunes.
Page 21. Oh, say shalom.
My name is Melissa Percal. We've been members of Temple Emanuel since 1993. No, actually 1991. And we have a remarkable connection to the Holocaust tour that's behind me that I want to talk a little bit about. In 1966, when Temple Emanuel was only about 4 years old, Lois and Paul Levine and Robert Goodman, who was the student rabbi at the time, asked the Westminster Synagogue and petitioned to get one of the Czech memorial scrolls. In World War II, most of the Czechoslovakian Jewish communities were wiped out, and the Torah scrolls were put into what was going to be a museum of historic preservation by the Nazis. And those scrolls were saved at the end of World War II and brought to Westminster Synagogue in the right after the World War II ended. The rabbi at that time was Rabbi Harold Reinhardt, who was my great uncle. And all the scrolls, there's 1,564 of them, were restored by a scribe and stored in the synagogue, just above where my uncle and his wife lived, my great uncle and his wife lived. And there they stayed, and so in '66 we asked, and we were granted a scroll on permanent loan. And this is scroll number 1,170, I think. And it came to the United States, and we used it continuously until just about 5 years ago when we retired it because it was really not in usable shape. We joined in '91, and I didn't even realize the connection to the scroll. And in 1997, two of our members, Peter Stoltzman and Lee Stoltzman, went to Westminster Synagogue, and they gave lots of tours. And at that time, they came back to the synagogue, our synagogue, and said, "This is this great trip we had," and they brought one of the Czech survivors, Eva Benz, to come speak. And I realized that they had been at my great uncle's synagogue. And my parents had even seen this scroll in the 60s when they had visited my great uncle on one of their trips. So that was back in '97. And Lee and Peter did a wonderful program about the scroll, and I reconnected and realized that it's sort of a funny Basheret kind of thing, that we would end up in a synagogue that had a scroll that at one time was at my great uncle's synagogue in London. And now that same London synagogue is where Rabbi Michael Farbman trained and got his ordination and became a rabbi. So it really completes the circle.
I saw Michael speak, and he was 22. You know, we're talking about 98. It's now 2012. And he was magical, and I didn't lose any time. I grabbed him immediately and said, "You're working for me. I'm going to pay you all the way through." And I told the congregation, I didn't give Michael any choice either. We're going to send you back to Russia. You're going to build a congregation, and we're going to go with you. I ordained Michael personally on the pulpit of the West London Synagogue in London at the seminary at the Leo Beck College. Each graduating student gets to select the rabbi who is his or her mentor, and he or she personally ordains.
So, coming here and having this opportunity to have your mentor and your friend, not just come, Mark Weiner would have come to my installation whichever congregation I went to. He came to St. Petersburg and installed me there, and the kind of relationships that we have, both we all as a family and me as a friend and as a colleague, are very deep and lifelong relationships that you establish with hopefully at least one, maybe more senior colleagues, and it's very, very meaningful and important to me, and I know it's meaningful and important to Mark. So he would have been here for me anyway, but I think for the congregation, the fact that it wasn't just a learned rabbi or an esteemed colleague that came to speak on the night of my installation and to help the congregation celebrate the moment of the new rabbi taking the helm, but the fact that it was Mark Weiner coming back, really, we try not to think about this, because I think every time you think about something like that, the goosebumps, it's like, how is this even possible? But it's this sense of completeness and of knowing that things happen at random quite often, but sometimes they don't, and it's very special. You can see a congregation that has, in the last 20 years, changed the rabbi every 3 years, and that may mean a whole variety of things. This congregation had a rabbi servant for 32 years, so it tells you something about the congregation, it tells you something about the rabbi, and about the fact that the shidduch worked. Like any congregations, we have a core of volunteers. Everybody that's watching this video right now can probably name 10 or 20 in their head. Every congregation has that. Large congregations have a small group of volunteers. Small congregations have a small group of volunteers. I sometimes have a sneaking suspicion that the number of volunteers at Temple Emanuel is greatly disproportionate to the actual size of our community. But I think that's also what attracts people to a place like this. That you come in and that you matter, and you also learn that you matter from knowing that if you don't show up and you don't roll up your sleeves and go and do something, ain't gonna happen. Because unless a volunteer does it, these things don't happen. And so there's a very special sense of that. At the interview that we were telling you about, people kept coming up to us and telling us about the involvement and how they came to TE. And at some point I smiled and I said, okay, either you were all prepped by the same person to say exactly the same thing, or there's something very strange going on. Because every person came up and they were telling us where they came from. Some moved into the area, some grew up here. No matter what the story was, and the stories were very different, it always ended with, and we walked in and we knew right away, we felt at home. This was different, this doesn't matter, it felt like home.